They stare out the window. Lost in thought. Not listening, not responding. Focus, we demand. But what if that wandering mind is not a distraction, but a simulation engine? What if your child isn't wasting time, but rehearsing how to survive? Daydreamers often frustrate adults. Teachers call them inattentive. Parents call them lazy. But in the realm of evolutionary psychology, the child lost in imagination may be doing the most important work of all, mental survival rehearsal. Our ancestors didn't survive by reacting. They survived by preparing. Thinking through scenarios before they happened. What if the predator comes from behind? What if we run out of food? What if I'm betrayed? That's not fantasy. That's mental armor. Today's daydreaming child is the heir of this same instinct. The brain, particularly the default mode network, active during daydreaming, begins constructing scenarios, testing possibilities, and even rehearsing emotional responses. It's simulation, not sedation. Cognitive scientists now believe that mind-wandering is a sign of advanced executive functioning. It's linked to creativity, empathy, future planning, and emotional resilience. And when children appear to be in another world, that world may be preparing them to face this one. Think about this: a child imagines being chased. Or becoming a hero. Or getting hurt. That's not just imagination, that's an emotional sandbox. The brain is rehearsing survival. But here's the dark truth: our modern systems, school bells, busy schedules, screen addiction, constantly interrupt this internal simulation process. We demand focus. We treat daydreaming as a problem. And in doing so, we silence the brain's ancient theater, the one that once ran daily simulations to keep us alive. So when your child seems zoned out, ask yourself, are they lazy, or are they activating a 100,000-year-old instinct that made our species resilient? A toddler repeats your words. A young child imitates your movements. It seems harmless, maybe even annoying. But what if that mimicry is more than play? What if it's genetic espionage, the brain's ancient way of stealing skills for survival? Mimicry is so deeply wired in children that they start doing it before they can speak. A baby sticks out its tongue when you do. A child copies your laughter, your posture, even your fears. Why? Because long before schools existed, long before books or lessons, survival was taught through imitation. Imagine a child watching their parent sharpen a tool, light a fire, or react to a rustle in the grass. That child didn't need explanations. Their brain recorded the gestures, the expressions, the reactions, not as entertainment, but as biological downloads. Neuroscience now confirms this: mirror neurons in the brain fire both when we act and when we observe someone else act. It's like the brain is learning in real time, without experience, without trial, without pain. This is why children mimic everything, including tone, emotions, even dysfunction. They're not being annoying. They're collecting survival scripts. And the darker side? They also internalize fear, anger, and anxiety, not because they understand them, but because their brain says, if my protector reacts this way, I must too. This must be the way to survive here. This is why trauma often moves across generations without a word spoken. Children don't need to be taught pain, they absorb it by proximity. Just as they absorb strength, silence, or resilience. The child who mimics is not a copycat. They are a collector of codes. The body language of survival. The facial expressions of safety. The pauses between words that signal danger. We think children are innocent. But their minds are running an ancient program, one we barely understand. Every echo, every copied glance, every imitated habit is part of a hidden algorithm, passed from generation to generation, ensuring survival before understanding. You've seen them. The quiet ones. The kids who don't jump into games, who hesitate before speaking, who linger on the edge of a group. Society says they're shy. But evolution tells a different story. What if that silence is tactical? In tribal environments, the first to speak was often the first to reveal weakness. The child who ran headfirst into the unknown, curious, loud, fearless, could also be the first to encounter danger. Predators. Traps. Poison. Mistakes that cost lives. But the quiet child? The observer? That child watched. Measured. Noticed who got hurt, and who didn't. This isn't social anxiety, it's ancestral intelligence. A survival blueprint disguised as introversion. Psychologists studying children who are slow to warm up have noticed something fascinating: their brains are more reactive to new stimuli. Not in a negative way, but in a highly alert, data-gathering way. It's as if their nervous system is saying, wait. Watch. Don't move until you understand the terrain. This is mirrored in the animal kingdom. Ever seen how a deer freezes before entering a clearing? It's not fear. It's strategy. That's the same logic playing out when a child hesitates before joining a group or entering a room. Their brain isn't broken. It's brilliant. The modern world, obsessed with extroversion, tries to pull these kids out of their shell. But that shell is a fortress. A 200,000-year-old neurological command center that says, observe before you act. Measure before you risk. Survive before you speak. And often, those shy children grow into the most insightful adults, because they were wired to learn before leaping. Why do children scream, kick, and cry, often over seemingly trivial things? It's easy to dismiss tantrums as bad behavior or immaturity. But what if tantrums were once a life-saving communication method? In tribal or early human societies, infants and toddlers couldn't rely on words. And silence could be deadly, especially if they were hungry, injured, or left alone. A loud, uncontrollable outburst was often the only way to guarantee attention, to alert the group that something was wrong. Psychological insight. Modern psychology reveals that children's nervous systems are still developing, and the part of the brain responsible for regulation, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't fully mature until their 20s. But evolution didn't wait for logic. It programmed intensity where calm wouldn't work. A tantrum ensured that no adult could ignore the distress of a child. And more importantly, it rallied the group. In tightly bonded communities, the survival of one child affected the survival of the whole. A crying child wasn't just throwing a fit, they were calling the tribe to respond. Dark twist, here's where it gets eerie. In modern society, many parents isolate tantrum-throwing children, punish them, or ignore their outbursts. But ancient psychology didn't account for nuclear families or parenting books. It relied on the tribe's shared instinct to never ignore the loudest cry, because silence could mean death. So the next time a child melts down in a grocery store or on the kitchen floor, understand, their body is not just reacting to spilled juice, it's reliving a moment from 1,000 generations ago. It's screaming not just for attention, but for protection. Philosophical closing. We are the children of survivors. Every scream, every fear, every stubborn refusal to share was once a signal fire in the wilderness. And the child you see losing control? They are not broken. They are echoing the instincts that built our species. Why do children instinctively fear the dark, even before they understand what danger truly is? This isn't about bedtime tantrums or imagination gone wild. It's something deeper, an ancient echo coded into our DNA. The fear of shadows was once a survival mechanism. Before homes and electricity, darkness meant uncertainty, and uncertainty meant predators. Centuries ago, long before civilization offered us light switches, our ancestors depended on the moonlight and the flickering flames of a campfire. In those days, something moving in the shadows could mean a predator. That fear? It wasn't irrational, it was protective. Today, when a child cries because the hallway light is turned off, we often chalk it up to immaturity. But what if that fear is something we've inherited, not from our parents, but from the prehistoric child hiding in a cave, clutching onto their mother as rustling came from outside? Deeper insight. Studies in evolutionary psychology have shown that certain phobias, like the fear of darkness, snakes, or being watched, are not taught. They emerge spontaneously across cultures and continents. Why? Because these fears once increased chances of survival. Children who avoided the dark were less likely to become prey. Their genes survived, and they passed those instincts on. Even the classic game of peekaboo taps into this survival code. It simulates disappearance and reappearance, reinforcing object permanence, but also quietly preparing a child for loss, separation, and the unexpected return of threat. Philosophical turn: the next time you see a child flinch at a shadow, realize, they are not weak. They are ancient. You are looking at evolution's whisper. The darkness speaks to something primal. And the child, without even knowing why, listens. Why do some children scream, cry, or melt down when a parent leaves the room, even for a moment? Modern psychology may call it separation anxiety. But what if it's something older, something primal? What if your child isn't overreacting, but remembering? Deep within the folds of our DNA lies an ancient memory, not a thought, but an instinct. In prehistoric times, separation wasn't just uncomfortable. It was fatal. A child left alone for even a short time could be hunted, eaten, or simply lost forever. Clinging to a parent wasn't annoying. It was survival. Today, when a toddler cries as their mother walks away, we often rush to diagnose. Is it attachment disorder? Is it spoiled behavior? But look deeper. That panic isn't a tantrum. It's the activation of an ancient threat system, the amygdala firing signals that scream, alone means danger. Evolution crafted a survival mechanism where the safest place for a child was always beside the caregiver. In fact, anthropologists have found that early humans never left their young unattended, ever. Constant proximity was not preference. It was protection. Some psychologists now suggest that this behavior, clinging, crying, watching the door, is less a dysfunction and more an echo. A genetic alarm system that evolved when the price of independence was death. But here's the twist: this same behavior, left misunderstood, is often punished or corrected in modern parenting. We teach children to suppress this instinct, even though, for millennia, it kept us alive. So the next time you see a child desperately calling for a parent, ask yourself, is this weakness, or a highly tuned survival radar activating in real time? What if lying isn't something children learn, but something they inherit? What if dishonesty was once the difference between life and death? We scold children when they lie. Tell the truth, we say, as if truth-telling is the natural state. But science tells a darker tale. Lying, even in young children, isn't learned from cartoons or bad company. It's a built-in cognitive tool. And it may have saved countless ancestors from destruction. Researchers have found that children as young as 2 years old are capable of deception. Not only that, the smarter the child, the better they lie. Why? Because lying requires advanced brain functions, working memory, impulse control, and theory of mind, the ability to understand what another person knows or believes. In ancient times, deception was a survival tactic. If a rival tribe asked if your camp had food, and you told the truth, your people could be wiped out. If a predator was nearby, pretending not to notice it could give you time to escape. Children learned, genetically, not just behaviorally, that truth can be dangerous. Even today, kids lie not to be evil, but to protect themselves. A broken vase. A stolen cookie. A bad grade. These aren't just misdeeds, they're micro-survival tests. Lying is a shield. And it's not just individual survival. In tribal communities, lying also served group cohesion. Sometimes, a well-placed falsehood avoided conflict or prevented chaos. When a child lies, what we're seeing is not a moral failure, but a mental reflex, shaped by centuries of uncertainty, predators, and threats. It's camouflage. A strategy. A way to navigate a world that once punished truth with extinction. The irony? The same society that punishes lying often rewards it in adults, politicians, marketers, diplomats. Somewhere along the way, the child learns that lying is wrong, until it's useful.